government say they are ready to blacklist destinations at short notice after warning holidaymakers that no travel is risk-free.
Meanwhile, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has described the government's operation to bring back stranded Brits at the start of the pandemic as too slow, impersonal and inadequate. Well, joining us now is the committee's chair, Conservative MP Tom Tugendhat. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
You are one of those, obviously, you're the committee's chair, who must agree with this, that it was too slow and impersonal and fundamentally inadequate. It was such a huge operation, though, wasn't it? An unheard-of operation to bring people home in an unprecedented time when details at that point were quite sketchy. Is it easy to sit on a committee and judge it now?
Well, I think it's worth reading the whole report, because actually we do two things. First, we say how impressive many of the Foreign Office staff were all around the world, often going far above and beyond what you could normally expect of people around employed by Her Majesty's government to do, and how well so many did. But our job isn't just to praise, it's also to try and help prepare should there be a next time, and that's why we're also critical. And so you're right, we do say that there are areas where preparation could have been better, where it was inadequate, and where sometimes it was impersonal. So we admit, picking holes in what was an unprecedented and very, very hard to plan for, perhaps even impossible to plan for event.
So what can we learn for the travel crisis we're dealing with now? Because we have a situation, don't we, where sometimes with a matter of, well, a 5-hour notice for some people, they found that if they did get on their flight to Spain, some were out there in Spain, they'd have to come back and quarantine for 14 days. Now, we know this morning that actually the government's saying anywhere you go could potentially face that risk. So really, it's at your own personal risk if you want to go on holiday abroad.
Well, and that's why what we're talking about is how does the government help? What can the government do to better prepare, and what can it do to better inform? Because the major failure that we found from our survey and from talking to people in the Foreign Office was to do with communication. It was to do with, odd things that you may not have thought about before. But did you know, for example, that many embassies could only update their answer phone messages inside the building? Well, clearly, if you're locked out of the building, that means that the answer phone message, when you phone the embassy and you need help, is out of date, wrong, misinformed. Of course it is, because nobody's been able to get into the building to change it. Now, with modern technology, that's not a very difficult thing to fix. The other thing is you look at the way that people can send emails or, text messages or WhatsApp messages geographically. Well, that's a technique that should be used around the world. If you look at the way some of our embassies and high commissions used Twitter to help people get to airports, not just to get on flights, it was extremely impressive. In other areas, it was less good. So what we're looking to do from this report is to learn from our best missions abroad and learn from the staff who did, frankly, an amazing job in so many parts of the world, and help those who either didn't have the resources or didn't see the opportunities that they could have done to see that actually there were better ways of doing it. So this is really a lessons learned exercise rather than a critical exercise.
Well, the interesting thing is, it seems like one of the key lessons was the poor communication of what was out there and what could be done. And yet this is exactly what we're seeing now, or the criticism that's being pointed at the government now because of the change in Foreign Office policy with regards to going on holiday right now. So you've just done your investigation, and the outcome, in many ways, there were positives, but the communication should have been better. And there were fundamental failings in that communication which didn't help the people that were stranded. That's exactly what is happening now. It's exactly what the government is being accused of. I don't think anybody would say that it's would deny that it's a moving landscape and they need to be able to react. But the lack of communication, this sudden change in policy, is leaving people stranded yet again.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why, I wish we'd been able to report a week or two ago. But, we can't predict the outcome, the outbreaks of these second waves any more than anybody else can. And that's why we've got to be responsive on communications. We've got to have the ability to, evolve our message, evolve our advice, not just according to time, but according to geography. What we're finding out more and more in the UK as well as around the world is a lot of these lockdowns are becoming extremely localized. It'll be a town, a region, not just a whole country. And so we need our Foreign Office to be able to be much more targeted in its communications. And now technology helps you do that.
But it's not just communications, is it, Tom? I think you're right. Of course, there has been criticism of communication and it could have been better. But it's reacting to the information. I mean, just put very simply, did they get it right or not? Do you agree with this policy of having to quarantine and doing it at such short notice because the information came through or not? The Spanish Prime Minister has criticised the UK. What do you think?
Well, I think the government has got an extremely difficult job to do. So actually, I have to say I am supportive of this because, the fundamental job of the British government is to defend and protect the British people. And that means making sure that as many of us can be kept safe for as long as possible. Now, that clearly is very difficult when we're going into holiday season and many people are going to have holidays disrupted. And that's extremely irritating.
So do you think that the public shouldn't be booking holidays right now, Tom, to go abroad?
Look, I'm not going to advise people what to do. My job is to hold the government to account, not to hold the British people to account. And so all I'm going to be doing is to be extremely cautious about what advice I give in the area I'm privileged to represent.
Yeah, but you're an MP. What would you tell your constituents?
Exactly.
What would you advise your constituents if they asked you?
I would advise people to stay very up to date in the advice and to manage the risk. And that means, make sure that you have an insurance policy that allows you to cancel at short notice, because frankly, none of us can predict even tomorrow, let alone next week or next month.
Well, it was 5 hours, wasn't it? That's how much time they were given on Saturday for people. I mean, even Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, was in Spain when this was set. I mean, the suggestion is potentially that he might have known that Spain could have got onto the list and he went anyway because he didn't want to be using privileged information, and now he's been stuck there and he's going to come back early all of it seems such a sort of a shambles, such a muddle, Tom.
Well, the problem is this disease is evolving in various different ways, and I'm really sorry, but this disease is sort of 6-7 months old, so we're not the experts in this virus that we would like to be. I mean, we're a lot more expert than we were a few weeks ago, a few months ago, and a year ago we knew nothing about it. So the amazing thing about this is how far we've come in such shorter time. It's really hugely impressive by our medical establishment, our research teams, and all the rest of it. And we're getting better at it. But the reality is that this is evolving in different ways. We are being surprised by second waves, and the government is having to react. Now, I don't know whether Grant knew or didn't know. I mean, I'm afraid I haven't spoken to him about it, and you'd have to ask him. But the reality is the government has got to react as quickly as possible. I'm glad that they have. But the Foreign Office has also got to react as quickly as possible. And that means providing information as quickly as possible, as geographically relevant as possible, and providing the support needed.
Do you have some sympathy with the travel industry who are trying to deal with this, trying to keep themselves afloat? I mean, there's a risk, we know, of big job losses, don't we?
This is an extraordinary moment for the travel industry, and it's an extremely sad moment because there are many, many businesses. I mean, we think of the large companies like, the airlines or whatever, but actually there are many smaller travel companies. Certainly there's several that I represent here in West Kent that are, family-owned businesses that have been going for many, many years and helping people have, a well-earned break once or twice a year. And that's been a huge benefit to our local economy, of course, but it's been a huge benefit to many people as well. And this is putting them under extraordinary pressure. And we know that, you don't replace it overnight. So this is a moment when many people are beginning to think again about how our economy is going to work post-COVID, because a lot of things are going online, a lot of things are moving off the high street, sadly.
No, with that in mind then, in order to try and carry on supporting these travel companies that are desperately trying to keep their staff members working and keep these holidays going, should the government be doing more to help those people that suddenly find themselves in a situation through no fault of their own, as in they'd gone to Spain because they were told that it was safe and those rules changed within about 5 hours and they're nervous about coming back because they're not sure whether they're going to get statutory sick pay for those 14 days quarantine which they have to take? Should the government be trying to do more to either guarantee that or make sure the emphasis is placed on businesses to make sure that they do pay? Because if I was coming back, or I'm sure there'll be people who are coming back and saying, I can't possibly quarantine for 14 days, I need to go back to work, even though they have to quarantine, there may be some that say, I'm going to take the risk and go back. Should the government do more to make sure that does actually happen, they do get that sick pay?
Well, look, I can't speak for the government, as you know. My job is to hold the government to account. But I can't see how we can punish anybody for obeying the law. I mean, it has to be right that those who obey the law get the support of the whole community. And so I hope that the government will look really hard at this, because this isn't something anybody expected. When the furlough scheme was put in place, it was to deal with an immediate emergency. When the sick pay rules were put in place, in the most extraordinary and responsive moment, Rishi Sunak really took on an enormous burden and really transformed our economy very quickly in a really impressive move by the Treasury. And now we're in a new situation. He's actually redesigning the economy of the United Kingdom and the Treasury every few weeks, it seems. But it does look like this is another moment where, in order to make sure that the public health message works, we again have to look at what sick pay is used for.